Welcome to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics, the podcast that delves into the power of traditional cattle genetics and the ranchers bringing them back. We're returning to the tried and true practices that prioritize what truly works on the ranch. Each episode, we'll talk to ranchers who are rediscovering the methods that built strong, resilient, efficient, and fertile herds in the 1960s and 70s. These breeders are blending the best of the past with practical solutions for today's ranching world. Whether you're passionate about the future of ranching or curious about heritage genetics, this podcast is for you. Presented by Boss Sires. Tune in as we reconnect with the roots of the herd. Here's your host, Patrick Powers.
Welcome to the Sustainable Stock Podcast, where we talk about cattle that work for the land, the rancher, and the long haul. Today's guest is Jim Elizondo. He's the founder of Real Wealth Ranching and a longtime leader in regenerative agriculture. Jim's built grazing systems that heal the land, cut inputs, and make operations more resilient. He's also a cattleman who knows what kind of genetics hold up in those systems, especially in heat, humidity, and on forage alone. Jim, I'm very excited to be speaking with you today.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm pleased to meet you all, and I'm happy to be here on this podcast. And what can I say? I just returned from a trip teaching and consulting in Australia and New Zealand, and it was very interesting because I could see what the correct adapted genetics with selection guidelines can do to improve the land. You see, when we want to manage our grazing, we need cattle or sheep that are able to be efficient converters of grass to beef or meat, but also to improve the land on which they graze. So they have two purposes.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, please tell me more about your travels. I know you had to have had a unique experience there.
Yeah, what I saw is that most people are doing overgrazing, which is grazing a plant before it has recovered, mostly due to poor genetics. Genetics that require help to perform. Genetics that require selective grazing instead of non-selective grazing. In our grazing program, the Total Grazing Program, we do non-selective grazing on well-recovered plants because that's how nature was designed. That's how plants and basic plant physiology shows us that we get a leafier regrowth when you take the grass down to 1 to 2 inches off the ground after it has been well recovered in its energy reserves. But for cattle to do this, instead of being hang-out fermenters as it was 50,000 years ago, we need special cattle. We need cattle that can do it and perform. That means cattle that can do more with less. And for that, we need to select differently. We cannot select for EPDs and for taller and lankier animals. We need to select like nature does. And that's what I teach in my adapted genetics and selection guidelines course.
Beautiful. Well, I was going to ask if you could speak a little further on your course. I've just been barely exposed to you, I feel like, but I feel like I keep finding my way to a lot of the materials that your courses are based off of. I've definitely become a student of Zeitzman and Bonsma, and I feel like that comes up quite often in your course just from the little bit I've encountered.
Yeah, well, you see, Bonsma was a great cattleman and observer. Johan was his pupil, and he taught me a lot about how to evaluate the hormones in cattle. And we had two sets of hormones, the sex hormones and the growth hormones. When the sex hormones appear in puberty, they reduce the production of growth hormone, and the animal will slow down in height growth and start to grow in length. And this can be observed in an animal, and early maturing animal will be shorter at the hip, but longer. And that means that it's reached sexual puberty earlier. And they will also tend to have a lighter bone than late maturing animals. Late maturing animals will have a heavier bone. And that's precisely what the feedlot wants. They want a heavier boned animal because they mature later and they know that. And the order buyer is told to buy animal with heavy bone. But heavy bone means not only late sexual maturity, but it will take longer to finish. That's what the feedlot wants. And will also give you much less profits to the rancher or farmer that carries the breeding stock. And another thing, heavy bone is related to longer gestation length. That means heavier birth weight. That means more dystocia or calving problems. And then to make matters worse, show judges have been selecting for straight rump when a cow, to be able to deliver a calf without any problem, like in the wild happened a long time ago, she needs to have a larger birth canal, and that is given by a sloping rump, not a straight rump. So those judges created a problem for ranchers and farmers.
So there's been two facets of leading us in the wrong direction. First, the slaughter end, because they're going to benefit from it taking longer for these cattle to mature, and then we've been directed wrongly.
But I understand the feedlot. They want to maximize their profits.
We all do.
Yeah, but we can have the cake and eat it too.
Absolutely.
We can create a set of very fertile, efficient females, and then put a terminal bull to them whenever we want to cater to the feedlot. And then they will have what they want, a heavier bone, late maturing animal, but we will not have to pay the price because we have our own set of very efficient females.
I like that idea. We make them work for us until it's their turn.
Yeah, so everybody wins. I want a win-win always because, we need the feedlot.
Well, to return to when we first started up and you talked about this overgrazing and no periods of rest, I heard your podcast that you were on probably last year, and it was the first time I encountered the term over-resting. And I've only heard that through your speaking. And I was wondering if you could go a little bit further with what that is and how that affects your ability to create these high-density grazing situations.
Oh, sure. You see, I believe that plants developed and were designed, forest plants, to be grazed down close to the ground so we could get a leafier regrowth. And this is easily observed when you cut grass for hay. You cut it from 1 to 2 inches from the ground, and the regrowth is leafy. Or when you mow your lawn, what comes up? Leaves or stems?
Stems?
No, when you mow your lawn, what comes?
Oh, you're right. Leaves, the new growth. I was thinking of what was remaining. I'm sorry.
No. And what were we taught in secondary school? That photosynthesis is how plants create energy and oxygen, right?
Yes, sir.
But it requires chlorophyll. So they are green, and when they are green, they create energy by photosynthesis. But the stems consume energy by respiration. So the difference between the energy produced in the leaf minus the energy produced in the stem is the available energy for growth, grass production, and to return to the soil via root exudates to feed the soil microbes that will in turn feed the plant. That's how this wonderful symbiosis between the herbivore, the grass, and the soil works. But when we do selective grazing, because cattle are ruminants, and ruminants require a certain quality of grass to perform well. Now I'm going to go back in time 50,000 years ago. We had a myriad of herbivores. Half of them by weight were hindgut fermenters like horses and elephants and rhino, and half of them by weight were ruminants. Hindgut fermenters can perform well on higher fiber, lower protein, lower quality forages. precisely what the ruminants will leave behind and move on in their migration, and the elephants will be the last ones to leave, taking everything down to the ground. When they did this, and you can still witness this in the Okavango Delta in Botswana, when they did this, then it would take months for them to migrate to another place, and when rains returned, they would migrate back, and it would take them months to come back. And by then, the grass had grown enough to be taken down again without killing it. And that's what we must mimic. But now we only have cattle and sheep. So we need special cattle that can do the same role that those megafauna hindgut fermenters did a long ago. All this you can see on my YouTube channel, and you can see on my Facebook page, Real World Ranching, with the scientific articles links. This is not something that I made up. The problem with all the grazing programs in the world, well, most all, is that their conclusions come from observations in their lifetime, how the ecosystem is working today, not how it worked 50,000 years ago. And what we found today or 100 years ago was completely degraded compared to what it was a longer time ago. How do I know this? By fossilized pollen, by fossilized spores of fungi growing in the dung of hindgut fermenters.
That's brilliant. So we need to adapt. We need to find and select for the genes that can fulfill a role that is no longer in our environment. And then we'll complete a full system.
Yeah, then we can do with cattle or with sheep the same effect on grass and land soil building like was done 50,000 years ago by half of the herbivores by weight being hindgut fermenters and the other half ruminants.
Okay, so in reference to that, do you believe that stocking rates can play a heavy role in that? That we can increase the footprint of what we currently have filling those roles because they were so much heavier in weight and had such a higher impact? Do we need to increase our stocking rates to mimic that?
Yes, but we also need to make money. You see, my slogan is that we need money, time, and health to be wealthy.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the love of money is not good, but we need money as a medium of exchange to buy the things our family needs.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then we need time to enjoy what we bought, and then health, because without health, nobody's wealthy. Okay, so to have those three, we need to increase stocking rate, yes, but when our grass productivity increases. And it increases very fast. Usually we can double the stocking rate the first year compared to rotational selective grazing, and more than double the first year compared to continuous grazing under the Total Grazing Program. But doing it with adapted genetics, like the ones that are selected correctly following nature, will make it much cheaper than doing it with unadapted genetics that require supplements and pampering and crutches like selective graze.
And far more affordably. We're constantly referring to inputs on our show, and we're trying to define them to the rancher. And we're trying to let everyone realize that inputs don't stop at feed. It also includes your time, your investment, your labor, and everything where the genetics fall short comes into the form of an input as well.
Yeah, I made a masterclass called, do you know how much it costs you per day to run a cow? That's very important. You see, I have an accounting degree. I'm a dairy nutritionist and I'm an agronomy engineer, and I devoted all my life to this. So I love it. It's my passion.
That's wonderful.
So let's say a labor unit costs you $80,000 a year. So if you have 100 cows, that's $100 per cow. That's a labor unit. So that's the highest cost, labor. Not hay, not other things. But let's say you have, instead of 100 cows, you have 1,000. Now it came down to $80 per cow. Now it's more viable to make money. And then when you graze stockpile grass, that is absolutely essential to increase long-lived soil carbon and to recruit seedlings of your best forage species and to create spongy soil, you save another $300 per cow per year compared to feeding hay.
I just learned of the concept of live stockpiling from another guest I had. I'd never encountered that concept before. And I think that these principles are brilliant, and if used correctly, can lead to flourishing environments for our operations.
Everything we do needs to follow nature. Whenever we contradict nature, we will pay dearly, and nature has deeper pockets than any.
Yes. Well, I think you touched on it there a little for me, but I've heard you state previously, and I'm not taking your words exactly, that the proper genetics will allow us for the full harvest of nutritional value of our property.
Yes, because what happens in nature when the animals grow fat and healthy? In the green season or in the brown season?
The green.
The green season, exactly. So in the green season, we want to put in front of our livestock the highest quality grass available through all the green season. And then in the brown season, we need to use a huge volume of accumulated stockpile grass as standing hay to feed our higher number of livestock through the winter or dry season. And we want to do this without overgrazing, which is regrazing a plant before it has fully recovered. Even in a drought, we do not want to create overgrazing as that shortens roots and kills our desirable species.
Yes, sir. Along that same line, I've heard you speak about the relationship of cattle saliva and the regrowth, and I find that very interesting. I was wondering if you could speak on that a little further for the listener.
Yeah, when you cut grass for hay, you cut to 1 to 2 inches of the ground, and it regrows mostly leaves at first, right?
Yes, sir.
But you don't cut it every other day or you will kill your grass stand. You cut it every so often so you're not killing or shortening the roots. Okay, that's with a mower. But when you do it with a cow or a sheep, in their saliva and the liquid in their nose, there are bacteria or microbes and growth hormones for the grass and vitamins B that makes the grass grow up to 80% faster after being inoculated close to the growth points, which are 1 to 2 inches of the ground. So that goes against grazing tall, taking the top third, and things like that, that came from a very obsolete, outdated experiment done by Kreider in 1953.
Yes.
People keep repeating it as a mantra. That's wrong. People, please wake up. We can be better.
Absolutely. Well, do you find that different genetics graze more efficiently in that environment, that have the ability to not be as selective of where they're grazing? Do you think that it requires the hand of man to force that out of most genetics, or are some just more suited off the bat?
Absolutely. It's a genetic component, and it's called nutritional adaptation, and it's inherited along with individual appetite. So there are cattle breeds and cattle individuals that will be able to take the grass down, lower quality grazing without losing body condition than others. And you can observe this in any herd. You can see in any herd of cattle some individuals that maintain their body condition better under difficult conditions than the others. And that's the way we select.
I could see how that could benefit tremendously. I mean, we try to have a spring calving season. We don't really direct too much. Our bull is constantly exposed, but we've timed it all out where we're mostly spring. And we do that for the nutritional load that's available. And I could see that benefiting us greatly if we had one cow and selected that over others that really optimize that to the fullest.
Okay, but you select that cow to be the dam of your next bulls. You follow?
Yes, sir.
But we need to select our cows based on productive longevity. A cow that is over 8, 10 years and has never failed to calve, never even gives us a bad look, always healthy, never gets foot rot, never mastitis, never have a miscarriage, never had a dystocia problem, nothing. Perfect cow. That's where we select our elite cows, 10% of our cows, to produce our bulls from.
Okay. Well, I've
And
heard you.
then we rank the bulls again. So it's a long process to get the very best bull.
Yes, sir. Well, I've heard you speak on your bull selection before, and you brought forth a new thought for me, which was if you have a good bull and you've selected it, you allow them to breed the herd, and then you remove them because your new greater genetics should be following.
Yeah, but the once you have a better bull come up the pipeline, then you take out the older bull because we are selecting on sex hormones, early sexual maturity, and the male hormone is testosterone. The higher the testosterone, the earlier they will mature. And a very masculine bull will throw very feminine daughters, and a very feminine cow will throw very masculine bulls.
Yes, sir.
But this means that they will tend to fight to the death at a younger age. So usually I sell them off when they turn 3 after using them as yearlings at 27 months and again at 36 months, 30 some months. And then I sell them because I have a better one coming up. If you do it right, you should have a better one or at least the same quality coming up because you're selecting from your long-lived productive females.
Perfect. Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a little shift now to maybe what we as producers could do. I feel like any step towards bringing our operation closer to the land is a step in the right direction. So I wondering if maybe you could speak on what some signs would be that we need to start taking a look at this a little further within our operation. What could be some red flags for us?
Oh, okay. Well, use a screwdriver. That's the main tool you need.
A screwdriver.
A screwdriver, a long one, at least 10 inches long, heavy. And you go to your paddocks and you push it into the ground. And if you find a hard pan 2 to 4 inches deep, that's as deep as the roots of your grasses are going. Now, hard pans at any depth in any place around the world are always created by one thing and one thing only: the lack of strong roots. And the lack of strong roots is always created by overgrazing, which is regrazing a plant before it has fully recovered. And overgrazing is always created by selective grazing.
Okay. Well, I know that I would not pass your screwdriver test, sir. So what is my next step?
Okay, once you find that you have the hard pan, and that proves that your roots are short because of overgrazing caused by selective grazing, then I would suggest that you take my course, the Total Grazing Academy, because you need to understand all that is behind it.
Okay.
You see, what you need to do is to create strong and deep roots.
Yes, sir.
Right? How do you create strong and deep roots if you have a very high stocking rate? Remember, stocking rate determines profits. The number of productive animals you can maintain at a low cost per farm determines profits. That's it. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So how can you do that without a program? You need a program. You need to maintain them in good body condition because a fat cow make you money. A thin cow will only make you sad. So we need fat cows, fat cows, fat cows. Never forget that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you need to manage your grazing in such a way that is non-selective. Take the grass down to 1 to 2 inches off the ground after it is well recovered, so you do not shorten the roots. And then you need to stockpile at least a third of your farm for a full year to make the soil spongy. And then that screwdriver will go in very easily, and the roots will follow the spongy soil. Why does it get spongy when you don't graze it for a year? Because of a higher fungi to bacteria ratio.
I have a side pasture I just fenced in. I've been here 10 years on my property and had about a 3 acre portion that was unused. It is so loose I cannot drive a vehicle out there.
Okay, go with
Meanwhile, on my other pasture, I don't have to worry about getting stuck one bit, but that's where the cattle are.
okay,
So,
go with your screwdriver. Please take pictures so you can post them on my Facebook group. It's open. It's a real world ranching. But if you take my course, you go into my private Facebook group. It's called Fat Wallet Membership.
okay,
Why do I call it Fat Wallet? Because we need money, right?
and we're returning to
Okay.
profitability.
Yeah, but first you need to have fat grass. That means grass that is stockpiled, so the root exudates are fatty instead of sugary. And that will create fat soil. That means high in long-lived soil carbon, spongy soil. And that will create better quality forages that will make your cattle fat. And then if you manage correctly, you're going to get your wallet fat.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Well, to shift away from what I can notice of my land, if I was a larger operation producer, what
Mhm.
would I be able to absorb? We've spoke a little bit on hormonal balance within our cattle and the traits we could look for there, and I would like to revisit that with you. But what could a producer look for in nutritional of their cow? Would there be red flags there as well? Would I encounter scours more often with my cattle? Would there be something that would red flag a nutritional situation for you?
Yeah, your mineral program. Because you're asking your cattle to consume everything and not only the best. Your mineral program needs to be working efficiently. If it's not, then you're going to start seeing symptoms of deficiencies, which are mostly created by excesses of something. For example, here in Katy, Texas, we have an excess of calcium in the water, in the soil, and in the grass. And there needs to be a calcium to phosphorus ratio of 1.5 to 1 for ATP adenosine triphosphate to be produced. And ATP is the fuel for the cell. When you see your cattle shiny and sleek, they have enough calcium and enough phosphorus, sorry, in their blood. And that's why they look shiny and sleek. When they do not, they will not look shiny and sleek. And that's caused by too much calcium. Now, grasses and legumes have more phosphorus when they are green, but when they are brown, phosphorus goes down the content, but the calcium stays up. So that's when they have more need of phosphorus by itself without any calcium. Okay,
Yes,
and
sir.
I teach that in my rwranching.com website. You can find the simple mineral mixtures you can make yourself. Yeah,
Beautiful. Well, that's going to be the basis of most of my questions. Is when do I know it's time to seek your knowledge? And I feel
it's
like I'm
important.
there. Yes.
This is very important because I was in New Zealand, in Wellington, New Zealand, in the North Island, and this student had 12 groups of cattle. How can you manage to not overgraze with 12 groups of livestock? It's impossible.
Yes.
So I told him to gather them together and make two groups only. So he made four. And deficiencies, mineral deficiencies started to show up. But he had not put out the mineral buffet. So cattle and sheep can decide to consume what they need that day in that pasture, in that water source, in that reproduction stage. Once he did it, the problems went away.
They know what they need. It just has to be an option available.
That's correct. They know what they need. Yeah.
Well, Jim, I don't feel like I would do a service to you and your operation if I didn't ask for you to explain the pillars of your program to me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. We have the four pillars of real world ranching, and they are the Total Grazing Program. Each one of them has their modules and their each chapters, and you have a Q&A at the end. And you have to pass some quizzes so you can advance.
Okay.
And the second pillar is the adapted genetics and selection guidelines The third one is nutrition when grazing. That's super important. We need to know how the plant functions and how the rumen functions so we can get the best efficiency, conversion efficiency, and health. Health comes first before efficiency, and that will give us the highest daily gains or winning weights or fertility. And then the optimal calving season, which is very important. Just by changing your calving season to the best time of the year, depending on your environment, and it needs to be short, no longer than 45 days of breeding, multi-sire breeding, you will reduce your cost by 40% and increase your stocking rate by 40%, and that determines profits. Once you sign into the Total Grazing Academy, you get 2 months free of live coaching. That's the Fat Wallet membership. In it, you will get a monthly masterclass, a monthly Q&A session live, group coaching, a monthly laser code session, and a monthly implementation PDF with all the links to the scientific articles supporting what I taught. So this is important because I have learned that when people take even my on-site course and do not get the continuing coaching and learning, they only get like 3% success rate when they get my online courses that they keep for life and they can consult at any time. Success rate goes up to 15, 18%. But when they take the on-site online courses and the continuing coaching, success rates goes up to 60, 65%.
Really?
And I don't want to lose my time, and I don't want you people to lose your time. I want you to have success. But to have it, you need to do your part. You need to do the work it requires. It will not come automatically. You need to not only sit down and listen, you need to actually change your mind, your paradigms, because we've been taught for a long time the wrong way. We've been taught the wrong way on how to select animals. We've been taught the wrong way how to select our enterprises. For example, I just thought and you can find this on YouTube, it's my podcast. Are you a breeder or a trader? That's very interesting because people need to decide early in their cattle raising career if they want to be a breeder or a trader. There is nothing wrong with either, but the younger you are in making this decision, the better for your lifetime success. So this is super important. So I put it out, it's free. People can listen to it for free on my podcast. It's a weekly podcast that I publish every week.
We'll attach that in the podcast description below.
Yeah, you're going to like it. For example, if you are a breeder, you will do whatever it takes to produce the best genetics, adapted genetics, that will help other like-minded producers to get the best out of their land. As I said, harvest efficiency, conversion efficiency, and improving the land with their actions. But if you don't want to do that and you feel better buying and selling livestock, don't waste your time trying to be a breeder when you're going to sell your herd of your best animals anytime someone offers you a good price.
That makes you a trader.
Then you know you're not a breeder and you're going to lose years of your life trying to do something you're not.
That's an excellent point. That's very well put.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to ask, how do you feel boss sires could play a role in this new world of cattle we're venturing into?
Well, you see, adapted genetics with correct selection guidelines are sorely needed. They are needed. We cannot, if we try to do this, the Total Grazing Program and the nutrition when grazing and the optimal calving season, with unadapted genetics that have been bred for higher and higher daily gains with higher and higher inputs and more selective grazing, is like pushing on a string. You're not going to get anywhere because you see, unadapted genetics degrade the environment, while adapted genetics can help you to improve the environment. It's as simple as that.
I've never considered it from that side, that the
Oh, yeah.
unadapted help in the degradation of the land.
Let me explain why. Unadapted genetics require crutches to be productive. Crutches like selective grazing, which creates overgrazing, which creates short roots and the hard pan you're noticing.
Yes, sir.
Plus erosion, plus lower stocking rates, plus because they cannot improve the land, then people start to fertilize with synthetics, which kills soil life. Then they start to use herbicides because they get encroachment of brush because of short and weak roots in their best grasses. And then they start to feed more energy supplements to their cattle because they were selected for that. Because of epigenetics, they would not be able to change fast enough for you not to lose money. So it's better to follow nature, select as nature does, and use epigenetics in your favor instead of against you.
So if you witness yourself following this slippery slope, one of
They
the best places to start could be in your genetics.
Yes,
Along with
yes, and yeah, you better start doing all because you see, the main driver of profits is stocking rate.
yes, sir.
And when you can increase your grass productivity 3 to 5 times the first year just by minimizing overgrazing, that is much more important in your profits than genetics. But at the same time, start to improve your genetics because it takes 7 years to change your whole herd. I just finished doing it in my herd. I had a graze dairy for 28 years and I just switched to beef cattle selling genetics.
Dude, I believe I've heard you speak on that before. You were working on your adapted Mashona herd, correct?
Yeah. Well, I started with tropical milking criollo, and then I started infusing Machona genetics.
Feeling a
And
little
now,
bit of that hybrid vigor is what you're getting going.
not only that, I'm getting a composite
Yes, sir.
that will be around 3/4 Machona, 1/4 tropical milking criollo, or whatever nature dictates, because I don't. You see, inheritance of genes is not mathematically. It's totally by chance. And there are millions of chances or different outcomes per gene that we cannot predict the outcome, but we can observe and read nature in what is showing us in the animal.
And you can create the opportunity for those to be expressed.
Exactly. That's epigenetics. So we start taking the crutches out. For example, my herd in the tropics, in Mexico, in the dry tropics, have not been dewormed for the last 18 years.
Whoa.
None, nothing. And they haven't been did for ticks. We have a lot of ticks over there, or for hornfly in many years.
That's excellent.
So that's how nature selects.
That's excellent. Well, I'm kind of at a loss. Do you feel like there's anything we haven't done justice in speaking on yet?
Well, the optimal calving season. I work in Florida in developing the Machona herd that now is the best Machona herd in the world. And it only took me like 12 years, so it's very fast. But no, what's important is that in Florida, people want to have unadapted breeds of cattle. And because it gets hot in the summer, the sperm on these unadapted European bulls dies in the summer. But it's just in the summer when they have a lot of green grass, just like here around Houston. So they have their bulls work in winter, early spring, and they are calving in mid-December. So that means that they need to feed hay for 5 to 6 months of the year in Florida. It's incredible, but that's what they do. So they have a very low stocking rate because of unadapted genetics. In heat adaptation, they don't have the heat adaptation that the environment requires. But they don't want to use Brahman. Of course, I don't want them to use Bos indicus, but Machona are African Bos taurus. They are the highest percentage of African Bos taurus genes breed that I know of. And we have done this with Dr. Stontengard of the USDA. So I know.
That's wonderful. I actually, one of my earlier interviews with Renee Strickland, and she has our commercial herd, and then she also has the Florida Cracker, and she just absolutely loves those moderate frame little guys. She says they are resilient dudes, and they will out forage everything she's brought into that area.
They are. And let me tell you something that my old mentor, a genetist in Mexico, said, Dr. Jorge de Alba. He said, genes have no breed.
That's beautiful.
That's very interesting because you see, even in a small animal like the cracker, the Florida cracker, you can get those genes into another and create a better animal with more beef, but with those genes that are resistant to parasites and diseases and heat. So genes have no breed. Remember that.
Yes, sir. I think that's very well put. Well, Mr. Jim, I do have a question for you. I like to ask of each of my guests. In your view, what is the moral obligation of the cattleman to the land, the industry, and future generations?
A moral obligation.
Yes, sir.
Well, we need to leave the land better than we found it. We need to regenerate the land to the highest level possible. God designed life, the grass, the soil, and herbivores to work together. And we should mimic nature because that's how it was designed. Then we have our moral obligation to our fellow cattlemen to sell them genetics that will help them make more money, the maximum profit possible, while they improve their land the fastest possible. Because we all need profits, but not only for today, but for tomorrow. Because we're going to leave a legacy. And a legacy should include better land, better livestock, and better persons, and a better environment. So that's what I'm striving for, and that's what I'm trying to teach, and that's what I want young people to learn.
Very well put, sir. If you had to name one takeaway for the listener today, what would you hope they walk away with?
I like the one about genes have no breed. You can find a good animal in any breed, and you can find a bad animal in any breed.
I like that as well.
And you will get better and better at your work, your job.
Yes, sir. Well, Mr. Jim, thank you very much for your time today. I really did enjoy having you on. And for the listeners, I'm going to have all kinds of links for y'all to click on and get in contact with this gentleman and all of his knowledge in the podcast description below. Thank y'all for joining us for another listen. And Jim, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you very much. May God bless you.
If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and check us out on YouTube and Facebook to stay in the loop. And as always, ranch with purpose and breed for the future.
Thank you for tuning in to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share. Join us next time as we continue exploring the legacy and future of cattle ranching. For more information, visit us at bosssires.com. That's BOSSIRES.com. Or connect with us on Facebook. Until then, stay rooted in common sense and connected to the herd.